Hello everyone, I'm glad to have you back on this channel and I'm really excited because you're watching the first video on literature. Today's video is going to be an introduction to English literature. So I'll begin with a quick definition of what is English literature, then I'll move on to its origins, forms, major elements, function, and then I'll draw a conclusion. Since our channel is about simplifying knowledge, I didn't want to make it too complicated, but I still think that specific terms or concepts need to be explained. I try to make it the less boring possible. If you want to go deeper in the subject, I try to put some links in the description box, so go and check if you're curious. I'm Gwen, and welcome back to the Kajak. There are plenty of definitions that you can find on the internet or inside dictionaries regarding literature. The one that I found interesting considers literature as the body of written works produced in a particular language, country, or age. Therefore, when we talk about English literature, it concerns literature written in the English language. But that doesn't mean that all of the others are coming from England. In fact, they are coming from all around the world. May it be the United Kingdom, Ireland, the United States, Canada, and so on. It is difficult to find precisely that which marks the beginning of English literature. However, we can still settle on the Anglo-Saxon period, which started in 449 with this Anglo-Saxon settlement in England and which ended in 1066 with the Norman conquest. We can settle on this period because we have several works of literature which are dated from approximately this period. But I will come back on periods in literature in the next video. With the settlement in England, Anglo-Saxon came with their tradition, including oral literature, and they spread it through the whole territory. And somehow, oral literature transformed itself into written literature. Now that we know when and who started it, the next question is where? And it's in England. I know, what a twist. Then from England, it spread through the British Empire and colonies. That is to say that English literature followed the people everywhere around the world. Nowadays, there are plenty of forms of literature. There is so many that might be confusing to anyone. Therefore, to make it clearer, I decided to make a difference between fictional and non-fictional literature. Non-fictional literature is based on real places, real events, real characters, and is more based on reality in general than on imaginary things. Non-fictional literature is composed of autobiographies, biographies, essays, diaries, magazines, and so on. On the contrary, fictional literature is based on entertaining the reader with imaginary words rather than reflecting the reality in which we are living in. This category can be separated between drama, poetry, and fiction. In drama, we mainly find plays and anything related to theater. Meanwhile, under poetry, we find poets and their works of art. And finally, under the fiction category, we can find anything related to short stories and novels. For this series of videos, we will focus more on the fictional category. When we're talking about literature in an educational context, it's mainly to analyze it. But please keep calm, this is not what we're doing here. Now, let's say you're a writer. There will be main elements composing fictional literature that you will need in order to make your story works. The first element is the author, the one who is producing the work of literature. Even though the author tends to be forgotten during the reading of a book, it's important to know the name and the background of the author. It helps to understand what, how, and why the author decides to write a story. Then, your story will need characters, and one of the main elements of characters is characterization. Is a character a major or a minor one? Is he a protagonist or an antagonist? What about his role, his motives? Does the character change? There is a real work behind the creation of characters to make sure the reader can relate to them and then love or hate them. Sometimes characters are inspired from real people. For example, many of F. Scott Fitzgerald's characters are inspired by his first love, Ginevra King. You can find her in the characters of Judy Jones in Winter Dreams, Isabel Borge in The Side of Paradise, and Daisy Buchanan in The Great Gatsby. You may have seen the 1974 The Great Gatsby, and then you might remember the famous "Poor boy shouldn't think of marrying rich girls."
Why didn't you wait for me? Because rich girls don't marry poor boys, Jay Gatsby.
Originally, it was said by Ginevra's father. I got an interesting story for you about this fact. Later on in life, King and Fitzgerald met again, and then she asked him which character in Gatsby was based on her. And then he answered, "Which bitch do you think you are?" Lovely, isn't it? After characters, a story needs a setting to make them evolved. This is the pleasant time in which the story takes place. It sets the background of the story and has a huge influence on the characters. A place can create a conflict with them. For example, if the family in The Grape of Wrath would have lived in a non-problematic area regarding jobs, agriculture, and so on, would they still have to go on the road? I'm not sure about that. Having characters and places isn't whole. To make a good story, you have to make sure you have a good plot. A plot is a chain of related events that creates the story, and one of its main elements is the conflict. This conflict can be external, just like being between one person and another, between one person and a group of people, or between one person and the whole society. However, it can also concern the troubles a character might feel internally, just like homesickness, fear, and the list is spread along. Then your plot will be about the resolution of this conflict. The resolution of the conflict is what will make your story going on. And last but not least, we must talk about points of views. It is really important regarding who are we following in the story, who is talking. It is really important to the comprehension of the story. But I'm not going to go too deep with it today, because it will be the subject of one of my next videos. Now, this is the point where you might be like, okay, that's nice, but what is literature for? Well, in the first time, I can tell you that literature is a medium which aims at creating particular emotion or reaction in the reader. It entertains during your free time, helps you to escape your daily routine, and with literature you can discover new words and characters with who you can sympathize or judge. Literature is also an expression of the author's feelings and emotions. It can reflect an author's own class or time. Secondly, I really think that the function of literature is really depending on who is reading the book, the expectations you might have with it, your age, and the moment you're reading it. I remember reading books that I found really entertaining at first, but when I grew up, I did not see the use of their existence anymore. On the contrary, there were books which were at first too difficult for me to read, and they turned into a moving experience while I had gone through some hardships in my life. The function you give to literature is totally up to your identity as a reader. This video is the first one of 4 videos dedicated to remind ourselves of the essentials of literature, or at least what I think as essentials to literature. This introduction was meant to explain a bit more about English literature before going on with other subjects. I hope this video was clear enough and not too boring. And I'm sorry guys for my voice, I'm really sick today. Nevertheless, I really hope that you have learned some things today and that you have enjoyed this video. If this is the case, please leave a thumbs up. And don't hesitate to tell us about your experience as a reader or regarding literature in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, I really hope to see you soon, take care.
This precious time when time is new. Oh.